Hey everyone, how's everyone doing this Monday morning? Let's see what we have here. Coffee with Final Cut Pro Radio TV Live here this morning, Monday, January the 27th. And we are going to talk about Final Cut Pro mainly, but also a couple of other things, NAB, Mac Pro, talk about the Mac Pro. I've actually started a Mac Pro 2019 Facebook group for those of us that have a Mac Pro, or if you just want to talk about it, maybe before you buy. That also would be very cool. Let me just check on something here. Turn that down. Check and see how we're doing. Lutz says, Man Cave Productions says, good afternoon. How you doing, Lutz? Glad to make it here with everybody. My name's Richard Taylor, in case you didn't know that. I'd like to put it up there so people know what's going on here. Let me just check. Got to check the YouTube channel, make sure that's going okay. There, that's turned down. That's fine. I got to monitor the channels as we go. Lutz says different background this time. Yes, I'm experimenting with different backgrounds to see how they work out. Gert says hi. How you doing, Gert? Gert. So it's the end of January, and there's not a whole lot of Final Cut Pro news specifically happening. New background, that's correct. Got a new background for today. Change it up a little bit. That's what I like to do. So I'm still broadcasting from my Mac Pro. The Mac Pro, let me tell you something. The Mac Pro, it's the best Mac I have ever owned by a very, very wide margin. I understand that a lot of people either can't afford them or don't need them. I completely understand that. There's lots of people that edit on a MacBook Pro. And I have myself, but I've always gone back to either the iMac or, in this case, I have a 34-inch LG monitor. It's ultra wide. I think it's 21:9 aspect ratio, something like that. And I really, really like it. So not only do I have the 34-inch LG monitor, I also have a smaller monitor. I think it's a 27 turned vertically over here to the side. And I have like the mixing board and watching the monitor. I can watch the audio over there and things. So I really like that aspect ratio. The 34 inch is great for a nice long timeline, whether I'm in Logic Pro or whether I'm in Final Cut Pro. So I posted this morning that as of today, Logic Pro 10 is now 10.4 is 2 years old. The Final Cut Pro is 2 years. Let's check and see what it is here. 2 years. One month and 13 days. I have a counter up over here at FCPRadio.com starting from when Final Cut Pro 10.4 was released. 2 years, 1 month, 13 days so far. So that is a long time between full number updates, not just feature updates, but full number updates. The only other time when there was a long expanse like that between a full number to another full number was 10.0 to 10.1. And between 10.0 and 10.1 Final Cut Pro, there was 9 separate updates during that time period. And that was also, I believe, over 2 years. Now, Final Cut Pro 10.4.8, we've had 8 updates since Final Cut Pro 10.4. Logic, as of yesterday, I believe, January the 26th, also turned, Logic 10.4 also turned 2 years old. So that also is a long time between full number updates. So what does that mean? Exactly. This is what it means. Big update must be coming. Expectations are rising. I think that is absolutely true. I don't think this is going to be a menial update, a little update with a few features. I think this is going to be something much, much bigger. Garrett says, not going back to a desktop model still, it is a beauty. Well, let me tell you something. I've always been a Mac Pro fan since the original cheese grater. I had a G5 and I had an Intel version, and that's absolutely my favorite version of a Mac. This one that I have over here on my desk, it's silent. You cannot hear it. I monitor the temperature. I have a couple of different apps monitor the temperature. This thing is completely silent. Now, I have 3 16-lane PCIe slots left, okay? I put in a USB 3 that has 4 USB ports because I needed a couple more than what I have. So I have 6 USB 3 ports, and I have an NVMe SSD that I put in there. I put in a single 2 terabyte NVMe SSD. Now, they have the RAID versions of those. They put in 4 at RAID 0, and I'm not a big fan of RAID 0. I just don't like it. I don't trust it, especially for storage. As a working drive, absolutely. The speed is phenomenal, 6,000 megabytes a second to 8,000, whatever. I'm getting 2,800 read and write off the single 2 terabyte NVMe that I installed on this Mac Pro. I use it as a working drive. As I'm working on something back and forth, yes. I immediately back it up to an external drive or my internal drive, whatever I have, and I immediately back them up. So having a very, very fast NVMe drive, the ones that are like 6,000 to 8,000 megabytes a second is fine for working. I don't store stuff on there and trust that it's going to be there. RAID 0, if you have 4 NVMe drives and you have a RAID 0, if there's any hiccup on one of those 4 drives, you lose everything on all 4 drives. Everything is gone, not just the one drive that has a hiccup. So Lutz says, I am thinking to sell his MacBook Pro and instead buy an iPad Pro and a Mac Pro. What do you guys think about this approach? I think it's a good approach. I like the Mac Pro. I mean, the iPad Pro I haven't had much experience with. I have, of course, a couple iPads, but I haven't got an iPad Pro. I had a Mac Pro. Gert says, love the model still. I love working with my MacBook Pro. Hope to switch to 16-inch soon. So I have a Mac. I have a 2019 MacBook Pro. I rarely use it. I just don't, unless I'm on the road or I check email on it and do some other things. I don't like the small screen size of the Mac Pro. I like a couple of other things I don't like. I like it, but not as my main machine. Not when I have a 34-inch beautiful monitor in here. Yes, you can get an eGPU. Yes, you can get external storage. Yes, you can get all this stuff external. Then you got an iMac, basically, which is all enclosed. Speaking of iMacs, I've seen reports that Apple's doing an all-glass iMac. Have you guys seen that? They're looking at developing an all-glass instead of a metal frame, but an all-glass panel of some sort. I don't know how they're going to do that. Do you think the next one might be a major update rather than a minor 10.5? A new paid version. So that's an interesting question, Nathan. No, I don't think 10.5 would be minor. I can't see it. They've had over 2 years, 25 months at this point. Why would it be? That's a long time to develop 10.5. When they work on these projects, when they released 10.4, they already started working on 10.5, probably. They already started working on 10.5 at that point, 25 months ago. I think something big's happened. They could go to Final Cut Pro 11 if they wanted to, Logic 11. But 10.5, starting out 2020, it's going to have to be something big. It's not just going to be a checklist of features. I think there's something much bigger coming. I don't know what it is. One of the things that people constantly request is BRAW support, especially recently. So I'd be very surprised if there's not a co-announcement at NAB, Blackmagic and Apple both co-announcing BRAW support in Final Cut Pro. That'll be a nice welcome announcement. A lot of people have requested that. Justine Paula Robillard says, good morning, Richard, and fellow editors. How you doing in South Africa? Nathan says, no, I mean like 11. It could very well be. It absolutely could be Final Cut Pro 11 that they're doing. It's going to be a big update. I mean, I can't see any excuse why it's not going to be a big update. What if Final Cut Pro is going to the iPad Pro? If you want Final Cut Pro and the iPad Pro, get LumaFusion. It's $30. It's fantastic. LumaFusion on the iPad is like Final Cut Pro on the iPad, but it's got more features than Final Cut Pro has. I don't know how they do it. I always, when I interview them, I always ask them, what are you guys doing? You're making all this stuff on an iPad that we don't even have on the full NLE version. LumaFusion for $30 is Final Cut Pro on the iPad. It's more sophisticated. It has more features than Final Cut Pro itself does. So that's what I'd recommend. Could Apple buy LumaFusion? I asked them about that. I said, what if Apple makes an offer to buy you guys? And they said, we'll have to see what the offer is, because they enjoy what they're doing. That's a big deal. Nathan says, yeah, no doubt. Whatever the update is called, it'll be big. I was just curious whether you thought it could be a major as in version number. Or, yes, I do think absolutely can think it certainly could be jumping to 11. Who knows? Justine Paula Robillard says 10.5 plus Catalina plus Metal is something big. I agree. I think there's something big happening. And the interesting thing is there's like radio silence. I haven't heard any major reputable rumors about what's coming in 10.5. They've kept it very, very well under wraps. So Lutz says, has LumaFusion XML export for Final Cut Pro 10? They were supposed to have it around Christmas time. I haven't kept up whether they have it or not. Like, I use Filmic Pro on my iPhone. Where's my iPhone? I got my iPhone 11 Pro Max, and I use LumaFusion if I'm doing a stationary shoot. However, the native camera app on the iPhone is fantastic for one reason. You can switch to the 3 different lenses it has while you are recording right on the screen. You just tap one, and it'll zoom in or zoom back out, depending on what you can do. Filmic Pro at this point, now they know about it and they're going to be changing it. Filmic Pro at this point, 5 taps to change a lens. 5 taps on the screen to change a lens. That's ridiculous. So I can't use it if I'm intending to change lenses while I'm recording. If I'm just doing a stationary sit and I'm not going to be changing lenses, that's fine. They know about it, and I'm sure that's going to be corrected in the new version. So going back to LumaFusion did say they were trying to get FCPXML export by Christmas. I don't know if they made that. Same with Filmic Pro. They showed that 4-screen demo of the iPhone 11 Pro at, it was the iPhone event, I guess they showed it. And they said they'd have it out by the end of the year. Well, they didn't make the end of the year. Then they said we'll have it out at the end of January. So here we are at the end of January. So I expect, I don't think they've delayed it again. I expect that they will have it out anytime. And hopefully you won't have to click 5 times to change the lens. And hopefully the other thing is, I want to be able to change those lenses while I'm recording, not have to stop recording, change the lens, start recording. I want to be able to change the lenses while I'm recording. That's the same thing that the Apple app does. The bad thing about the Apple app, and it's ridiculous, everybody knows that audio is 50% of good video, at least 50%. There's no audio indicators on the native camera app for video. That's ridiculous. There's no adjustment. There's no volume adjustment. There's not even any meters on it. What is wrong with those people that develop these apps? They don't know that professionals need metering, audio metering. That's ridiculous that they don't have that. But the fact that you can change the lenses while recording is fantastic. Kudos for that. Get audio meters on that app. Get audio adjustments on that app. That'll be fantastic if you can do that. And higher bit rates, that also would be cool. So what else we have going on here? So Final Cut Pro is 25 months. Final Cut Pro 10.4, 25 months ago. Logic Pro 10.4 has just turned 2 years itself. So those are things that we can talk about. So Nathan says, Richard, I've seen some confusion about working with audio in Facebook groups. As a post-audio engineer, I started writing a proper FCPX signal flow. I thought maybe you already done this. No, I have not. Sure, Nathan says, if not, I'd like to get your input. Absolutely, Nathan. However, before you spend a lot of time on it, I would wait for Final Cut Pro 10.5 because I suspect, the one things that I suspect is they're going to redo the audio. They're going to have a better audio workflow in Final Cut Pro 10.5. When I was talking to Michael Cioni, if you guys saw the interview with Michael Cioni, I asked him, he's recording an album in Final Cut Pro 10. I asked him what he'd like to see in Final Cut Pro 10.5. And one of the things he said, he'd like to see a down flow mixer for both audio and for video, not just for audio. Absolutely. Absolutely. I do all my serious audio in Logic because Logic is a dedicated digital audio workstation. It's meant for audio. Final Cut Pro is not a digital audio workstation. Yes, you can work with audio in Final Cut Pro, and I do all the time for just smaller things. But like my podcast, Final Cut Pro Radio, it's going on 1.2 million downloads at this point. I can't work with that. I personally prefer Logic for working with audio. So I do all my podcast editing in Logic. I could do it in Final Cut Pro. I don't like the way Final Cut Pro, coming from an audio background, I do not like the way audio works in Final Cut Pro. I don't like having to jump in and out of a compound clip in order to apply a compressor to a bunch of clips. I don't like that. First off, it takes you to another timeline. You can't even stay in the same timeline and open it up. You double click on a compound clip and you zip over here, and now you've lost reference to that clip to the rest of the clips in the timeline. It's by itself. I don't like that. I don't like jumping in and out of compound clips. That's me personally. Everybody else has of course, their own preference. So, what's happening at NAB this year? In the past, we've had FCP Works, FCP Exchange, 2 years, maybe 3, I can't remember. Apple did a presentation. The Final Cut Pro Apps team did a presentation to NAB at the FCP Works, FCP Exchange event 2 years in a row. Both times they had 250, 300 people there, something like that. Both times they announced a new version of Final Cut Pro around NAB. Not a full number update, just a new version. I think one time it was a full number update. Last year they skipped it. Nothing new at NAB, nothing new at the FCP Creative Summit. So this year I think maybe we're going to see 10.5 or an NAB. It'd be a perfect time for them to show up. And once again, Apple will return to FCP Works or something else to show us. Now, if they don't do that, that'll be interesting. So Nathan says, coming from an audio background, I do like a lot of the Final Cut audio workflow, but I do wish we had at least some roll stereo buses. Well, that's just one of the things. You know, a mixer of some sort so I can control things. But once again, listen, it's not a digital audio workstation. Final Cut is not a digital audio workstation. It's not designed like one. It's a nonlinear editor. So I don't expect all these things to jump into Final Cut Pro. I don't expect that. I can do plenty of things with just basic audio in Final Cut, and I do. I don't take my audio all the time out of Final Cut into Logic, but anything serious I do. When I'm working on an hour and a half audio podcast, I'm not going to do that in Final Cut Pro. I'm just not going to do it. It's just too much of a pain. Scrolling back and forth, hour and a half long timeline with my hand. I get carpal tunnel doing that. In Logic Pro, I have two separate scrolling timelines. The timeline stays stationary. The audio scrolls underneath. I can two different zoom levels I can have. One just the audio editor, one on top. Plus I have the ability to add compressors to the buses. I can click on the track. If I have 100 different clips on that track, I can apply a fade in and fade out or crossfade to all of them with one click. I can change the gain individual clips and stuff. There's all kinds of things that, look, where do filmmakers take the audio? They don't use Final Cut Pro for the most part. They don't use Final Cut Pro for audio. They go to Pro Tools. Pro Tools is a digital audio workstation. Logic is a digital audio workstation. That's what I prefer. If you like audio in Final Cut Pro, that's completely fine. Some people do their podcasts. I can't. I've tried it. I can't do it. There's too many things I can't do. But anyway, what else have we got? Let me just check a couple of things here. I'm just checking some comments, make sure we're keeping up with those. But anyway, I think there's going to be audio improvements in Final Cut Pro, whatever that is, whether that's some kind of a mixing board. Now, what's going on here? Garrett says both 10.5 will be released on March 25th. Now, Garrett, if you don't know something, you're just messing with us, right? March 25th. Why March 25th? You mean like 3 weeks before NAB? That will be interesting. That's your birthday. Oh, okay. Very good. Happy birthday when it gets here. My birthday is March the 20th. Usually March the 20th is the first day of spring, but this year it's not leap year. It typically isn't. The first day of spring arrives right before midnight on March the 19th. At midnight, right before midnight it arrives, so right before March 20th. But usually my birthday is the first day of spring most years. This year it happens to not be. Maybe we'll see a Resolve-style approach in a new version, FCP Logic motion compressor tabs. Would you like that, Nathan? I'm not sure if that's beneficial. I like to keep the Logic code and the Final Cut Pro code separate, personally. Two separate teams, two separate apps. Round tripping now would be great. That would be great. Motion round tripping. One of the things in Final Cut Pro 7 that I always liked, you could add a motion project to a Final Cut Pro 7 timeline. The actual project, you can actually add it to the timeline. You can click on the motion project in the timeline. It goes back to motion. You make your modifications. When you come back to Final Cut Pro, it's updated. That was a fantastic round trip. That kind of a round tripping would be fantastic. With Logic, you can put a Logic project in or a Logic whatever, and motion project back into Final Cut Pro 10 timeline, absolutely. Probably best keeping them separate. I think so. Keeping them separate, but some kind of a better round tripping solution, that would be fantastic. So let's get back to NAB for a second. So in the past, we've had Final Cut Pro-centric events at NAB, okay? We had Monday night was the FCP Exchange, FCP Works, Ripple Training was in there, LumaForge was in there, Apple was in there contributing to that presentation about an hour or so. That's where they announced 2.5 million and 2 million users at that event. They announced it in 2017 and 2018. 2 million in 2017, 2.5 million in 2018. They didn't show up at NAB in a public way. Yeah, they were behind the scenes. I understand that, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an Apple Pro Apps team actual presentation that the public can attend. So that typically was on Monday night. After that was the Guru Gathering, the Final Cut FCPX Guru Gathering, initially started by Steve Martin, Ripple Training, and then last year LumaForge took it over. It wasn't Final Cut Pro specific. It was just a gathering for everybody to get together. It was certainly Final Cut Pro. It was involved. And then on Tuesday, there was the Super Meet. In the past, the Super Meets had Final Cut Pro. The Pro Apps team was there. There were people on stage demoing Final Cut Pro. One year, I think 2018, was Brad Olson talking about how he did Off the Tracks. The year before that, Thomas Grove Carter, I think, was 2017. He was there demoing Final Cut Pro, how he did a commercial. So that's another event that had Final Cut Pro things happening. And then we also had LumaForge during the day at NAB 2017, had the Faster Together stage, which they had 2 or 3 days of sessions. Everybody had sessions. A lot of that was Final Cut Pro. It wasn't 100% Final Cut Pro, but a lot of it was Final Cut Pro. Last year, they took over the Super Meet time slot and location, and they did the Faster Together stage presentation, kind of like Super Meet, but not so much. Not so much. A lot of different vendors and stuff. There were some there. So right now, it's a little bit early. It's end of January. We don't know what's going to be happening at NAB as far as Final Cut Pro. Listen, if there's no Final Cut Pro announcements, if Apple doesn't have any presentations, if Faster Together doesn't happen, if there's no FCP Exchange, FCP Works Apple event this year, I'm less likely to go, because the only reason I went there was because of all these events that were happening. Last year was none of that, except for the Faster Together stage. There was some Final Cut Pro stuff, but there was no presentations and stuff anywhere close to NAB. There was there a Guru Gather? Yeah, there was a luncheon called the Faster Together something. This year I don't know. I mean, the Guru Gathering is expensive. A bunch of people chipped in on it, but I know it costs a lot of money, so who knows what they're going to do this year. So far, I have not heard a single thing about any Final Cut Pro specific event. However, it's still early. A month from now, we should have information on any kind of Final Cut Pro centric events. I'm not talking about Apple having a booth. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just the Pro Apps team actually doing a demonstration of Final Cut Pro 10.5. Perfect time. So last year at NAB, there was no update to Final Cut Pro. They didn't do any presentation. At the FCPX Creative Summit, no update to Final Cut Pro. There was nothing happened around that. So we're really, really overdue for a big update to Final Cut Pro. Like I said, 25 months since Final Cut Pro 10.4, and 2 years, just turned 2 years, Logic 10.4 just happened. So I hope FCPX gets speech-to-text built in and the ability to import scripts where you can edit text scripts automatically. I'd like to see that as well. But here's another thing that I like Logic has that Final Cut doesn't have. It has a Notes tab. You can have notes, text notes, alongside in a tab. They can be per project or per track. Just the ability to open a PDF or a text file in Final Cut Pro would be most welcome. Bring your text file in, bring your captions into Final Cut Pro. You can copy and paste them in titles and stuff. That would be fantastic. It doesn't even have a notes field. If Logic's had one for years, I use it all the time. So Justine says, I'm so confused by all the attitude of Apple to wait so long. It makes me concerned. You would think they would say something just to squash humors. That's not what Apple does. Apple is very particular about controlling expectations. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. They usually don't comment on rumors, so that's fine, but I haven't heard any rumors about 10.5 other than the fact that it's been a long, long time. To me, that says it's going to be a big update. I can't imagine them bringing 10.5 out or Final Cut Pro 11. Who in the heck knows what they're doing? They might start Final Cut Pro 11 for the new decade, 2020. Who knows? Whatever they're doing, there's going to be big. They've already done the big update to Metal 2. That's already the most of that plumbing's already been done. So that's not what 10.5 is going to be about. Further refinement, of course. People say, I see it all the time. I saw it this morning. Justine says, I know it's not the Apple way. They're selective about what they want to manage expectations about. I'll give you an example. The Mac Pro, okay? They showed it at WWDC in June. They showed it. All the people could, see a mock-up version or whatever, a real version. They show all the specifications. So they showed it. It's going to be out later this year. In the fall, they said, okay, it's going to be out in December. Once we got close to December, they actually announced a launch date. So all three of those times, they were managing expectations for people who wanted the Mac Pro. They don't do that with everything, though. They have pre-announced new versions of Final Cut Pro in the past. They absolutely have. When the Mac Pro came out, they also said there's a new version of Final Cut Pro coming out in the fall. They pre-announced that. But since then, it's been kind of silent. And to be honest, 2019 was a pretty boring year for Final Cut Pro. The Mac Pro was much bigger news. So I've got a Mac Pro. I've been waiting for a long time. So we'll see what happens. I'm not, like I said, it's still early. Okay? It's only January. There's plenty of time for things to happen. I'm sure some things are taking place. There's not a traditional, there is a super meet this year on Tuesday. I think it's closer to NAB Convention Center. I think it's to the Las Vegas Convention Center. I think it's closer. There is one, however, Mike Horton's not involved. It's just Dan Berube and also Future Media Concepts are teaming up to do a super meet. So that's not, whether Apple's going to be there, do some kind of presentation, I don't know, but that's not really enough. They need to do more than that. They need to have their Pro Apps team come out and demo FCPX 10.5 like they've done in the past with other versions. Oh, I forgot to have my coffee. Here's my coffee. Minnie Mouse. It is coffee with Final Cut Pro Radio TV Live. I'll be coming back on like I always do with these things. Hopefully I get to NAB. I need a couple things to happen. I need Final Cut Pro centric events, and I need to have a sponsorship to get me out there. I'm on the East Coast. So in the past, both of those things have happened, except for last year. There was no Final Cut Pro centric events, not too many anyway. So we'll see what happens over the next month or so. What else is going on? Let's see. So one of the things that people, let me see what Nathan says. I saw an article a couple of days ago about a new Premiere feature productions. These NLEs are stepping up on workflow features. I think Apple sees this and will give us some good workflow changes. That's one of the things people were talking about is collaboration with Final Cut Pro. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the ability to manage proxies the way you can manage regular media, relinking proxies, having more options to do proxies rather than just a quarter resolution ProRes, LT, ProRes proxy, I mean. I like to see other resolutions. I like to see the ability to do 720p from a 4K or 6K file rather than just a quarter resolution. Justine says, I would love to go, but airfare is just prohibitive. I'm sure it is. It's not that cheap for me either. I mean, the hotel, I'll stay there 3 or 4 nights and transportation, meals and stuff. But I've been sponsored in the past, and we'll see if I get sponsored again to go out there. If I do, I'll be reporting from as soon as I land to when I leave. Mostly Final Cut Pro-centric stuff. I'll be hunting those things down, but I got lots of friends. I'll be talking to LumaFusion people. I'll be talking to Kino. I'll be talking to all kinds of people there. Black Magic, I attended their press event last year. I streamed that live. So if I get there again, I'll do the same thing. I'll be visiting the show floor. Can't see everything. There's plenty of places that stream live, lots of things that I'm not going to be streaming. I am going to be doing mostly Final Cut Pro stuff and other people that I've had on the radio show. Proxy would be a brilliant addition, a varied slotting range of values for proxy, absolutely. An H.264, H.265 version, not just a ProRes proxy version, I think. Or at least the resolution would we like to have. So what else do we have? So speaking of Kino, Robert Kruger is on the latest version of Final Cut Pro Radio. We started Final Cut Pro Radio episode 100, our first one of 2020. And the interesting thing about Kino, the new version of Kino, so it has two things. Number one, if you're on Catalina and you can't open any legacy media, Kino can open legacy media. It can also sort by just showing you legacy media. So you can open it in Kino, you can play it, you can pick in and out points, set markers like you normally do, and then export it into a compatible format. So it is all the stuff that you can't do natively in Catalina, you can do in Kino. The other thing about Kino, it's getting BRAW support. I don't know if it has it yet, if it's been announced yet, but listen to the latest Final Cut Pro Radio podcast with Robert Kruger from Kino. He talks all about it. BRAW support, if it's not there already, it's coming in Kino. You're going to be able to open up your BRAW clips in Kino. I don't know how much control you're going to have over it as far as adjusting the BRAW, the RAW. I don't know how that's going to work in Kino, but you're going to be able to open it in Kino. Nathan says, 2019 felt like the year of other NLEs finally adopting and improving on certain things Apple's been doing since 2011. Time for them to reinvent again and keep the industry on its toes. Yeah, of course. That's what we want. We want to see a big update for Final Cut Pro 10.5. Whenever I talk about an update, full number update from 10.4 to 10.5, people say, well, I'd like to just have stable app. Well, of course. That's the first thing they should be doing is stability, speed improvements. But you don't have to have just stability and speed improvements or features. You can have both. There's no reason why you can't have both. They've had over 2 years at this point. So let's see some of that Metal 2 implementation. Listen, if it's going to be optimized for the Mac Pro, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I got a Mac Pro. I'm sitting here waiting. Speaking of the Mac Pro, one of the things that I'm really, really glad that I did was I got the 32 gigabyte Vega 2 Pro GPU. There's a couple things I didn't know when I bought the Mac Pro. That Vega 2 Pro or the Vega 2 Pro Duo enables the existing Thunderbolt ports. You have 2 on top, 2 in the back. It enables those to be used as display ports. If you don't have a Vega 2 Duo or a Vega 2 Pro, or a Vega 2 Pro Duo, the Thunderbolt ports on top and the Thunderbolt ports in the back of the Mac Pro cannot be used for displays. They're just data and charging ports. I didn't know that when I ordered that 32 gigabyte GPU, but I'm sure glad that I did. So it not only enables the other 4 ports to be used as displays, Thunderbolt 3 ports, it also gives me 4 additional Thunderbolt 3 ports and an HDMI port. But enabling those other ports for displays is a big deal. I didn't really pay attention to that, but that's one of the case. If you got the base model GPU, those ports cannot be used as displays. They can't be used for displays. So that's one of the things. So right now on my Mac Pro, I have 3 PCIe slots available, 3 16-lane PCIe slots. I have an NVMe card in one and 8 times. Excuse me. And that has given me 2,800 megabytes a second speed for a single 2 terabyte. I also have a USB 3 card in there to give me 3 more USB ports. 4 more. So I have a total of 6 USB 3 ports, and I have 8 Thunderbolt 3 ports. They're not all filled up, but they're kind of filled up. Peter Kuman says, hello, everybody. How you doing, Peter? Where you from? Let us know where you're from. So, speaking of NAB, what is Blackmagic going to announce this year? They always have something big to announce. They have one of the biggest booths there. They took over Apple's booth. So, probably Resolve 17? Is that a good guess? That's pretty sure. I mean, that's usually what they do is a new version of Resolve. It'll be in beta for a while. I think 17, right? Peter says he's from the Netherlands. So Blackmagic, but I'm curious what they're going to do hardware-wise. Are they going to have a new camera? Or are they going to improve the existing 4K or 6K cameras? The main improvement I'd like to see with the 4K and the 6K cameras is better low light performance, number one. And the other thing is an articulating screen. The fact that it doesn't have an articulating screen is a no-go for me. I got to have an articulating screen. So here's my setup. This is my GH5 setup. I have just this basic wooden handle here. I have their audio interface that I can put XLR audio into it. By the way, this SC electronic mic, so it's like a medium shotgun, is absolutely the best mic that I've ever had for DSLRs and for iPhones as well. So this is my GH5 setup that I have. It's very handy. I can hold with either hand, just a basic cage with the handle on it. And this is what I use. I love having physical dials for audio. I absolutely love that. So as you can see, this is not a XLR audio, but I have it going in to an adapter on this 1/4 inch to XLR adapter. I have 2 of these microphones. Now, the thing about those microphones is they don't make them anymore. I got a second one this year. This is what they are. This is the best sounding microphone. It's a shotgun. It's a very narrow path for audio. It has a 10 decibel boost or cut. I'm not sure which one it has, but I love the quality of it. It's by far better than Rhodes that I've tried. I've tried all kinds of mics. One of the things it's really good for is in a room where there's echo, it cuts out so much of the echo. It's fantastic because it's such a narrow shotgun. It's hypercardioid is what it is. So Niles Delta says tidy camera rig rich. I wish for B-Raw for Final Cut Pro before I wish for a Blackmagic camera. I'd be very surprised, not that I haven't been surprised in the past. I was very surprised that there was no update at the FCPX Creative Summit. That was not something that I was counting on. Well, actually, there's been no update in 2019 for Final Cut Pro besides Metal 2 support. That's a lot of work, but it's not very, it's kind of boring. So I would be very surprised if both Blackmagic and Apple do not announce B-Raw support in Final Cut Pro at NAB this year. That would be very pleasant. So also, let me bring that up while I got everybody here. I have started a new Mac Pro 2019 Facebook group. Anybody can join at this point. I'm not going to, restrict it. If you don't own a Mac Pro 2019, that's okay. If you just want to find out about it, maybe before you buy, that's fine there. We just started it. We have about 40 people, I think, so far. So it's not going to be one of these groups that has thousands of people. I can't imagine that. So if you want to join that, it's called FCPX, Facebook.com groups Mac Pro 2019. That's how you join that. Of course, the latest edition of Final Cut Pro Radio is out. Episode 100, that's our latest episode. And like I said, I think we're going to see B-RAW support in Final Cut Pro. There's too many of those cameras. It's a top request for any new version of Final Cut Pro. So what do you guys think about Final Cut Pro? Do you think it's going to happen? I think it is. I think we're going to see 10.5 around NAB. We could see it sooner. I mean, they could release 10.5 in March, say, and still talk about it at NAB. Absolutely, they could do that. That certainly is possible. As long as they have something new to talk about at NAB, they'll probably be there. So I think that's just about it for us today. I wanted to jump on here before I might be back later this week as well. Let me just check. Okay, so the other thing is Logic. Logic's 2 years old. I mean, typically they update all the time. Now, they put in a lot of features when they update, so we'll see what happens. Once again, my name's Richard Taylor. I think that's about it. Let me just check my notes real quick. Like I said, Robert Kruger is on the latest edition of Final Cut Pro Radio. You, of course, can find the podcast in iTunes and your other favorite favorite podcast aggregator, so whatever you choose. Go to FCPRadio.com and you have, here's the iTunes link right there. You can go on there and there's version 100. FCPRadio.com. Don't forget, Robert Kruger's the latest. Nathan says, thanks, Richard. Have a good one. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in. I'm going to head out of here myself. I got some other things to do this week. If there's nothing else to talk about, like I said, Robert Kruger, it's a good interview on the podcast, talks all about the new version of Kino, legacy media support, B-RAW support, a lot of other great features. We'll see if the ProApps team shows up for any kind of public demonstration at NAB. Peter says, great seeing you again, Richard. Thanks for all your information. Really appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in, Peter. Appreciate it. So what do you guys think? NAB. How many of you going to NAB? Anybody going to NAB besides me? If I go? We'll have to see. All right, everyone. I think we're going to head out of here. This has been Coffee with Final Cut Pro Radio TV Live. My name is Richard Taylor. Nathan says, nope, he's not going. I mean, Peter says, nope. Yeah, that's because you're from, where are you from? Netherlands, I think, right? Yeah, the Netherlands. That's why you're not going. It's expensive. It's not, of all the events, this and the FCPX Creative Summit are my two favorite. I think the Summit is probably my favorite because it's Final Cut Pro centric. We'll have to see what happens this year. The actual NAB Show floor opens on Sunday this year, I think at 11 o'clock in the morning, 11 or something like that. And then that's when the show floor opens. There are classes. Future Media Concepts does have classes on Saturday all day. They have all kinds of classes for Premiere and Avid and Final Cut and After Effects and all that stuff. That's what they have. And then the Sunday morning is when the show floor opens. If I go, I'll be coming in Saturday. I'll start live broadcasting as soon as I get there. Emilio says, hello, Richard. How you doing, Emilio? Where you from? Where you watching from? Let's see if there's anything else going on before we tune off here. He says he has booked tickets and hotel. Emmerich says, maybe boring, but after Metal Update, playing 3 streams of rendered. Yes, I understand. I understand it's a big update. Metal 2 was a big update. I understand that. But once again, it's like under the hood update. It's not something that 2019 was not that exciting for Final Cut Pro on this, for as far as features and stuff. They didn't really do anything with it, just bug updates, performance updates, Metal Update, all under the hood type stuff. Emilio says, exhibit passes are ready. Yes, you can don't pay for them. There's plenty of free codes. You can get a free exhibit pass if you go there. Tweaks123 says, Tweaks, thanks again. See you soon. Emilio says, first time coming from Greece. That's a long ways for NAB. That's pretty cool. I enjoyed it. I've been here for 3 years, last 3 years, 2017, 2018, 2019. If I go I don't enjoy traveling that much. Airplanes, I come from the East Coast. Vegas is not quite on the West Coast, but it's almost on the West Coast. So I don't enjoy like going through airport hassles and all that stuff, but it's okay once I get there and then come back. So we'll see what happens. I'm kind of planning on being there, but that could change if, I do expect that there to be a Final Cut Pro Apps team event this year. And we typically know in February, maybe toward end of February, if that's going to happen. And if anybody else is going to be doing any kind of a Final Cut Pro-centric event at NAB, that should be announced as well shortly. So I'm not really in the market. I talked about Blackmagic and a new camera. I'm not really in the market for a new camera. My GH5 is doing fantastic. I have a GH4 as a backup camera. I have my iPhone 11 Pro Max as another camera, which I take that all the time. So I'm not really in the market for a new camera, but one of the main things I want this time is I want to have all the features that I have in the GH5, articulating screen, all the other features, the audio interface, but I'd like a lot better low light performance. Even the G5S does not have good enough low light performance for me. This time, the main thing I'm going to be going for, it's got to have articulating screen now. I don't want a non-articulating screen like the Blackmagic has. I don't like that. I got to have an articulating screen. But I do want better low light performance. So when I decide to get a new camera, if the only one is like the Sony A7S II or the 3 if it comes out, if that's the best low light performer by a wide margin, I'll have to maybe switch. We'll have to see. Other things are a consideration too, but I don't want just a marginally better low light. I want a really good low light. I'm filming bands in some of these clubs and all, and I'd like to have better low light performance. That's one of the main criteria. But like I said, I'm not really in the market for it. I'm going to be heading out here, everybody. This is Richard Taylor. Stay tuned. Final Cut Pro Radio, FCPRadio.com. You can, what else do we have? So I'm on Facebook, but here's the deal with Facebook. You can follow my Facebook account when I go live and stuff, but don't necessarily put in a friend request. My Facebook account is not video production and it's not Final Cut Pro centric like my other social media are. You certainly can follow over there, but I don't accept all the friends requests. I'm not interested in a bunch of nonsense and If people are posting about politics and stuff, I don't even want that on my timeline. So my timeline is filled with a little bit of Final Cut Pro stuff, but it's more filled with animal rescue, it's filled with arts and things and some comedy and stuff. I like to keep it upbeat. I'm not interested in people that are getting into the weeds on stuff and post a lot of negative things. So I don't accept all the friends, but you certainly can follow over there, right? Peter says maybe a GH6, maybe, but from what I understand, the low light performance of Micro Four Thirds is not going to ever be that great. So we'll have to see. I'm not in the market, but if the GH6 comes out and it's a lot of great new features, who knows? I could spring for it. Then I have another 4K or 6K camera. I mean, the GH5 does 5K natively. I can shoot 5K in the GH5 natively, internally. If you have an anamorphic lens, you can stretch it to 6K, so who the heck knows? Anyway, but I'm going to head out of here for today. My name's Richard Taylor. Thanks for tuning in. If you don't have any other questions, let me just check my list here. Black Magic at NAB, they always have something good to show. So we'll have to see how all that stuff goes. We are at 58 minutes and 17 seconds. I think that's plenty, right? Don't forget, FCPRadio.com, everyone. Don't forget we have our Facebook group now for the Mac Pro. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. My name's Richard Taylor. I will talk to you the next time.